2, 1.
Good morning. This is Professor Anderson with a little bit of feedback for your rough draft of the writing assignment number 4, the research-based report. So here on this side, I have pulled up the components of the report. This is from the PDF that's located in week 6 in the assignment folder and the papers to be written that week. And then here is your rough draft. And I'm just going to go through each section and share with you some feedback on each of them. So if we take a look at the title page, this looks perfect. We move on to the letter to the decision maker. I have this pulled up in split screen, so you can't see the page break in here, but I know it's there. The letter to the decision maker, you want to make sure that this that you're following the same format. You do have in here my report on. You do say that this is the report that I shared with you based on the request to continue to conduct some primary research. So what I would recommend is you organize your sentences and utilize a sentence structure that's very direct and to the point. Enclosed, please find my report on increasing emergency room nurses, period. This is the result of the primary research you approved last month. The report analyzes the shortage, so just as short as possible. I notice in here, and I'm going to share with you throughout this little bit of feedback, you're using a type of sentence structure that does two things. One, often they are fragment sentences, and then two, often they are run-ons and not complete sentences. So what I recommend focusing on is short, concrete sentences where you're just exacting the subject and verb and moving on to the next sentence. Sometimes that helps to get in the flow of making sure that you're using complete sentences throughout. So the purpose of this letter of transmittal or this letter to a decision maker is to state, here's the report, remember, and then remind them, hey, look, remember you authorized it. This report does A, B, and C, and thank you for your time. And so at the very end, what I recommend to say is, instead of, I hope the opportunity given me to write this paper will serve well and be beneficial to the organization. Thank you for your time. This is, again, another example of it's at once both a run-on and a fragment. You have three ideas going on here in one sentence, and one of the ideas, each one could be separate. I recommend instead the last sentence, thank you for your time. And leave it at that. Of course, you hope that they'll implement your plan in the real world. Should you propose this to your chain of command? Absolutely, you hope that, and they know that because you wouldn't have asked for additional time to do some primary research. You wouldn't have shared this, the literature review. You wouldn't have invested any time in it. So of course, it's your hope that they'll implement it. The letter of transmittal is designed to say, here's the report. Remember, you authorized it. This is what the report does. Thank you for your time, and moving right on. The executive summary that you have, what I recommend is using some brief headlines inside of this executive summary. So let me share with you the problem, the solution or recommendations. So I want to share with you a couple of things in here. I'm going to read to you these first three sentences. Shortage of emergency department nurses impact patient care tremendously. The ED is mostly overcrowded with patients, coupled with a shortage of staff could lead to a disaster. Delay of patient services compromises the health of patients, which leads to negligence. All right, a couple of grammar things that we need to do. First of all, you want to be very direct. You have a subject-verb disagreement in the first sentence. Shortage impacts. Shortage is one thing. That's your subject. Impacts is your verb. So you want to make sure that your subject and verb agree. So I recommend instead saying a shortage of emergency room nurses impacts patient care, period. When you add things like tremendously, any of these adverbs ending in ly, oftentimes it just inflates. It's very subjective. You want to just you have shown that there is an impact on patient care, period. The level or degree of it, that's subjective. You want to remove that. Another thing, when you're introducing, I like how you've introduced the excuse me, the topic and then the title and then the acronym. You want to make sure if you have a capitalized acronym, then you have to capitalize this. So you would say a shortage of capital emergency, capital department, comma, ED, comma, nurses. That way you have introduced the proper noun, pardon me, and the acronym that you'll be using throughout the paper. Impacts patient care, period. The ED is overcrowded with patients. Not mostly. You're going to give a, remember, you want to make certain that you keep your paper objective. Do you have proof and evidence that it's overcrowded? Yes. Is it mostly? Is it likely? Is it somewhat? Is it a little? That is very subjective. You want to just state the facts. The ED is overcrowded with patients, period. This, coupled with the staffing shortage, leads to disaster. Again, you want to make sure that you have that you're stating things objectively. Does it lead to it, or could it, or might it, or you want to remove those kinds of things. So I have noticed that throughout your paper. I'm using these first 3 sentences to share with you 3 things to pay attention to with grammar throughout. 1, your subject-verb agreement. 2, your sentence structure. Break it down very concretely. The more succinct that you can be, the better, the more impactful your message is. And 3, avoid subjective words like tremendously and mostly and could have. You want to make sure that you are being as factual as possible. The more that you can relay in a research-based report evidence, the more powerful your report becomes. So here you've given an understanding of what the problem is. You've given an understanding of, in general, what what the problem is and how it recurs. You want to make sure that this second paragraph, this first one, is in general. The second one is very specific. This is very specific to your department, and remove this first person reference. Instead of saying, I collected data on the ratio of nurses to patients, just say data on the ratio of nurses to patients it corresponds with data on patient safety. I'm not sure exactly how, but you want to remove those personal first person references. Instead of saying, I interviewed 6 ED nurses, say interviews with 6 ED nurses, experience ranging from 3 to 15 years, gives insight into the nature of their work. The data shows the ratio of nurses to patients. So I hope that that's helpful. All right. So here you have your recommendations. That's good. We're going to move to the table of contents. So this table of contents up here, you want to change. You need to make sure that the whole table of contents follows the same pattern. So if you have overview of methodology and all these dots and lines across, then you have to do that for all of it. And I need you to pay attention to APA style for a table of contents. It uses a basic outline, like using Roman numerals. And I believe that can be found in the research-based report resources. You'll see the template. There's a template for a memo, there's a template for APA table of contents. You want to make sure that you use that. So then as we move into the introduction and the background, you want to make sure, again, I think I shared with you covering and combing through to identify run-on sentences and fragment sentences. The background is the background in general of your specific workplace, what that problem is. The purpose of this study is to make sure that you show that you want to illustrate and highlight the problems that this background shows us some problems, and the purpose of this paper is to show that it is a problem and to offer resolution. Overviewing the methodology, you've done a good job here. You want to make sure that you, whoops, I need to stop this and start another one. So you'll have 2 screencasts for this.